Ido village was a quiet, peaceful community in the heart of Nigeria, surrounded by dense forests filled with wildlife. Among the villagers, one man stood out, Okon. He was a hunter known for his exceptional skill and generosity. Okon was not just any hunter, he was tall, muscular, with a strong beard that gave him a commanding presence. His piercing eyes and well built physique made him the subject of admiration, especially among young women in the village. But Okon was different. While other men his age were starting families, he seemed uninterested in marriage. The village elders, especially the fathers and mothers, would often remind him of the importance of settling down and raising a family. Okon, you are young and strong, they would say. Now is the time to have children while your energy is still with you. However, Okon would brush it off. I will marry when I am ready, he would reply, continuing his daily routine of hunting and providing for the village. Okon's generosity was unmatched. He often caught large bush animals and gave them away freely to the young women in the village, asking them to prepare pepper soup. Under the big tree in the center of Ido village, Okon would gather the villagers, offering them food and palm wine. The young and old alike would eat and drink, grateful for Okon's kindness. And this is what made him loved by all. But as generous as he was, Okon remained single. Even with all the admiration he received from the women, he showed little interest in settling down. Some speculated that perhaps Okun was too focused on his hunting to think about love or marriage. Others whispered that he was waiting for the perfect woman, someone as special as him. It wasn't until one day, after much pressure from the village elders, that Okun began to reconsider his stance on marriage. As the years passed, Okon realized he did want a family. He wanted children who would carry on his legacy, but who would be the right woman for him? As fate would have it, his heart was soon captured by a young woman named Asari. Asari was the pride of Ido village. She was known for her beauty, grace, and warmth. Her dark, smooth skin shimmered in the sunlight, and her long black hair flowed down her back like the waves of a river. Every time she walked through the village, her presence was felt, with villagers praising her beauty and character. Her figure was perfect, and her smile could brighten even the gloomiest of days. Okon had seen many women, but there was something about Asari that captured his heart. It didn't take long before word spread that Okon, the village's most eligible bachelor, had finally found someone. The announcement of their union brought joy to the hearts of the villagers. After years of urging, Okon had finally decided to settle down, and everyone believed that Asari was the perfect match for him. Their wedding was the event of the year. Nearly everyone from Ido village and even beyond the village came to witness the grand occasion. The village square was decorated with colorful fabrics and musicians played their drums and flutes, filling the air with pleasant rhythms. Palm wine flowed freely, and the aroma of freshly prepared pepper soup wafted through the air. Okon stood proudly in his traditional attire, a wide smile on his face as he gazed at his bride. Asari, dressed in a beautiful white and gold wrapper, looked like a queen. Her friends danced around her, celebrating her and the next chapter of her life. Everything seemed perfect. The festivities went on for hours, with the villagers singing and dancing long into the night. Okon was proud. He had found a wife, someone who would stand by his side and build a family with him. The elders of the village were also pleased. At last, Okon had settled down, they said. Now we can expect children soon. But as the night drew to a close and the guests left the couple to their private quarters, Okon began to feel anxiety. It was their wedding night, and like every groom, he had waited for this moment. He was ready to start his new life with Asari. But little did he know, this night would not unfold just as he had imagined. When Okon and Asari entered their room, they were both exhausted from the day's activities, but as Okon prepared to get intimate with his new wife, something unexpected happened. No matter how hard he tried, they couldn't make out. Confused, he looked at Asari, and asked her if she was a virgin. She answered softly, "No, I am not." The two continued to try throughout the night, but nothing worked. Okon was perplexed. His heart raced with confusion and fear. What could be wrong? Asari, seeing the size of Okon's manhood, began to feel uneasy. "It's too big," she whispered, almost in disbelief. The reality of the situation started to sink in for both of them. The morning after their wedding night, Okon and Asari sat in silence. The joy and excitement from the previous day had faded into uncertainty and confusion. He had always heard stories about men who struggled with intimacy, but he never imagined he would be one of them. He had many questions in his mind, but none of them had clear answers. Asari tried to comfort him, placing her hand gently on his. "Maybe it's just nerves, Okon. We've been so busy with the wedding preparations. Let's give it time," she said, her voice soft and reassuring. But Okon wasn't convinced. Deep down, he knew this wasn't a simple case of nerves. His manhood was abnormally large, something he had never paid much attention to before. But now, it seemed like a curse. He had married a woman he adored, but he couldn't fulfill the basic duties of a husband, and his pride was bruised. Days turned into weeks, and the problem persisted. Every night, Okun and Asari tried to be intimate, but nothing worked. Asari, though patient and understanding at first, began to grow frustrated. She had hoped that things would get better with time, but the situation remained the same. Okun's size made it impossible for them to consummate their marriage. The tension between them began to grow. Asari's once sweet and gentle demeanor started to change. She became distant, spending more time away from their home, visiting her friends and family. Okon, on the other hand, became more withdrawn, throwing himself into his hunting work to escape the disappointment he felt each night. One evening, after yet another failed attempt, Asari broke down in tears. "Okon, I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice filled with frustration. "We've been married for a year, and we still haven't been able to consummate our marriage. This isn't how I imagined my marriage." Okon's heart broke. He had tried everything he could think of, but nothing had worked. He didn't know what to say to her. He loved Asari, but he couldn't blame her for feeling the way she did. "I understand," Okon said quietly, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Maybe, maybe it's best if you go." Asari wiped her tears. The next morning, she packed her things and left. The villagers were shocked when they heard the news. How could a marriage that had started with so much celebration end so soon? Rumors began to spread like wildfire. Some said that Asari was to blame, that perhaps she wasn't patient enough. Others, however, started to whisper about Okon. Maybe something is wrong with him, they speculated. Why else would Asari leave so suddenly? Asari confided in her close friends and family, telling them the truth about why she had left. "Okon is a good man," she said, "but he's too big. We tried for a year, and we couldn't. It just wasn't possible." The news spread quickly throughout Ido village, and soon everyone knew about Okon's problem. Okon tried to ignore the gossip, but it was impossible to escape it. Everywhere he went, people whispered and stared. His closest friends, Ebuka and Jide, were the only ones who stood by him during this difficult time. "Okon, don't give up," Jide said one evening as they sat under the village tree sharing a gourd of palm wine. "Maybe the problem was Asari, not you. You should try again." Ebuka nodded in agreement. "Yes, Okon, you are a strong man. Don't let one failed marriage stop you from finding happiness. Remarry, and things will be different." He heed the advice of his friends and finally decided to remarry. The thought of going through the same ordeal again terrified him, but deep down, he still longed for a family. He couldn't let the failure of his first marriage dictate his future. Besides, not everyone believed the problem was with him. Some villagers thought it might have been Asari's fault, that perhaps she was too sensitive or weak. Encouraged by his belief, Okon made up his mind to try again. This time, his wedding was a much smaller celebration. The grand celebration of his union with Asari had left a bitter taste in his mouth. He wanted something quieter, away from the prying eyes and wagging tongues of the villagers. His new bride, a beautiful woman named Ekanem, was from a neighboring village. She had heard rumors of what had happened with Asari, but she chose to ignore the rumors, thinking that Okon's kindness and strength were more important than whatever gossip was spreading. Their wedding was simple yet heartfelt. Close friends and family gathered to witness their union, and once again Okon hoped for a fresh start. He treated Ekanem with care, ensuring she felt loved and respected. But in the back of his mind, the fear lingered. Would the same thing happen again? The wedding night approached, and Okon's anxiety grew. As the evening wore on, the memories of his previous failure with Asari began to haunt him. He tried to push the thought away, focusing instead on Ekanem's beauty and the hope that this time things would be different. But as soon as they attempted to be intimate, Okon realized that nothing had changed. Despite Ekanem's patience and willingness, the same problem arose. Okon's manhood was still too large that they couldn't consummate their marriage. Ekanem, though more composed than Asari had been, was clearly distressed. Okon, I don't know what to say, she whispered in a shaky voice. This isn't normal. Okon's heart sank. He had hoped that somehow the issue had been with Asari, but now it was clear that the problem lay with him. Once again, his body had betrayed him. He tried to comfort Ekanem, assuring her that they would be fine and that they would find a solution. But deep down, he knew that this was the beginning of another failed marriage. As the months went by, the tension between Okon and Ekanem grew. She was more vocal about her frustrations than Asari had been, often lashing out in anger. What kind of man are you, if you can't even be with your wife properly? She would shout in moments of frustration. Okon, feeling helpless, would say nothing, his shame growing with each passing day. Soon, Ekanem's patience ran out. She began to spend more time outside the village with other women, sharing her woes with them. It's the same thing that happened with Asari, she would say, her voice tinged with bitterness. Okon isn't man enough. I can't stay in a marriage like this. The gossip spread quickly, just as it had before. This time, however, the ridicule was worse. The villagers were less sympathetic and more mocking. Some openly laughed at Okon when they saw him, while others spread exaggerated stories about his condition. Okon felt so bad. It wasn't long before Ekanem decided to leave. She left on her own. She packed her things one evening and walked out, not even bothering to tell Okon where she was going. As time went on, the villagers noticed her absence, and once again the rumors gained momentum. Two wives gone, they whispered. There's something wrong with Okon. Humiliated and heartbroken, Okon withdrew even further. He stopped speaking to his friends, no longer wanting their advice. He had tried twice and it failed twice. The idea of remarrying seemed impossible. Maybe, he thought, he was never meant to have a wife. Maybe his fate was to live as a hunter, generous to people, but forever alone. Okon spent the next few months in solitude, focusing on his hunting and distancing himself from the villagers. His once cheerful demeanor had faded into a shadow of what it used to be. Each time he ventured into the forest, he welcomed the solitude it provided. The village, with its constant gossip and prying eyes, had become a place of shame for him. Okon's pride was bruised, and he was greatly hurt. One day, while resting under the village's big tree after a successful hunt, Okon's friends Ebuka and Jide approached him once more. They had heard about the troubles with Ekanem, and though they felt for their friend, they couldn't ignore the fact that he was still unmarried. Okon Jide began, we know things have been hard, but you can't just stop living. You're still young. You deserve happiness. Maybe the third time it will be different. Okon sighed deeply. The truth was, despite the humiliation he had faced, the thought of spending the rest of his life alone frightened him. His desire for a family and for a child had not gone away. Maybe his friends were right. Perhaps. Even after two failed marriages, there was still hope for him. Months later, word spread through the village that Okon was preparing to marry again. The gossip started up once more, this time even louder than before. A third wife, the villagers asked, how long will this one last? Despite the rumors, Okun remained resolute. He had found a new bride, Amina, a gentlewoman he traveled far to get. He had found her on one of his far hunting trips when he left the village after his second marriage failed to find peace in a distant land. Okon loved her because she seemed so kind hearted. The wedding was modest. Okon hoped that this time things would be different. He wanted so desperately to believe that Amina would be the one who could give him the family he longed for. But on the night of their wedding, they had the same problem. Okon's size had made it impossible for him to be intimate with his new wife and consummate their marriage. Like the wives before her, Amina tried to be patient, but a few weeks after, she became frustrated. Okon could see it in her eyes. She was disappointed, just like Asari and Ekanem. Amina looked at him sympathetically, but remained firm. I need more than this, Okon. I need a husband who can fulfill his duties. I've heard rumors in the village, and I tried not to listen, but now I see that they were right. The shame hit Okon like a punch to the guts. He had hoped that Amina, of all the people, wouldn't listen to the gossip. But now she too was beginning to doubt. It wasn't long before the rumors spread once more. Amina, like the other wives before her, began to tell others of Okon's problems, and soon the entire village started talking all over again. This time around, the ridicule was unbearable. Everywhere Okon went, people pointed and laughed. Some even openly mocked him in the marketplace. Here comes the man who can't keep a wife. They would jeer. What's wrong, Okon? Are you not man enough? After Amina left, Okon made a decision. He would never remarry again. He couldn't bear the thought of facing another failure. His confidence was shattered, his heart was broken, and his reputation was dashed. He resolved to spend the rest of his life alone, hunting and providing for the village as he had always done. But never again would he allow himself to be humiliated by love. Okon fully embraced his new life as a bachelor. He no longer entertained thoughts of marriage or companionship. One day, after a long hunting trip deep in the forest, Okon decided to take a route he had never traveled before. The forest was thick with tall trees and lush vegetation. He felt a sense of calm in the forest, away from the judgmental eyes of the villagers and away from his shame. He could be alone with his thoughts here. As he journeyed further from the village, he noticed a small stream trickling through the trees. It was a beautiful, serene spot, and as Okon bent down to fill his water flask, he heard a soft voice behind him. Do you need help with that? Startled, Okon turned around to see a young woman standing nearby. She was breathtakingly beautiful, tall with a graceful figure, glowing brown skin, and a radiant smile that seemed to light up the entire forest. Her hair was braided in long, intricate patterns, and she wore a simple yet elegant cloth wrapped around her waist. Okon was stunned for a moment. Sorry if I startled you, she said, still smiling. I saw you struggling to fill your water flask. Let me help you. Okon, regaining his composure, handed her the flask. Thank you, he mumbled, feeling slightly embarrassed. She filled the flask with water from the stream and handed it back to him. What brings you this far into the forest? She asked as she sat down on a nearby rock. I'm a hunter, Okon replied. I often come here to hunt, but I've never seen you here before. Do you live nearby? The woman smiled mysteriously. My name is Nkem, she said. I live in a small village not far from here. I often come here to fetch water. It's peaceful here, don't you think? Okon nodded, feeling strangely at ease with her presence. They sat by the stream for a while, talking about life in the village, hunting, and the beauty of the forest. Okon found himself opening up in a way he hadn't in a long time. There was something about Nkem that put him at ease, something kind and understanding in her eyes. As the sun began to set, Nkem stood up to leave. I should get back to my village, she said. It was nice talking to you, Okon. Perhaps we'll meet again. Okon watched as she walked away, her figure disappearing into the trees. He felt a strange pull towards her, an attraction that was unlike anything he had felt before. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. He had sworn off marriage and relationships, hadn't he? For the next few days, Okon couldn't get Nkem out of his mind. Her smile, her voice, the way she had so effortlessly made him feel comfortable. It all lingered in his thoughts. He tried to distract himself with hunting, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing by the stream, filling his flask with water. On his next hunting trip, Okon found himself unconsciously following the same path he had taken before. When he reached the stream, there she was again, just as beautiful and peaceful as the first time. This time she greeted him with a knowing smile. I had a feeling I'd see you here again, she said playfully. Are you following me, Hunter? Okon chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through him. Maybe I am, he admitted, or maybe I just enjoy the peace of this place. They spent the afternoon talking again, and this time their conversation grew more personal. Nkem asked him about his life in the village, and Okon, feeling he could trust her, confided in her about his failed marriages. I've tried everything, Okon said, but no matter how hard I try, I can't be with my wives. It's as if I am cursed. After the third marriage failed, I gave up. I decided I was better off alone. Nkem listened intently. Her expression was thoughtful. I don't think you are cursed, Okon, she said gently. Sometimes things happen that we don't understand, but that doesn't mean there's no solution. Okon shook his head. I don't know. I've tried so many times, and I've only faced disappointment. I'm tired of the shame, the gossip, and I'm tired of feeling less of a man. Nkem looked at him with compassion. Have you ever thought that maybe the problem isn't with you, but with the way things have been done? Perhaps there's something different you need to try. Okon frowned, confused. What do you mean? Nkem hesitated for a moment, then spoke carefully. In my village, there's a wise man. He's known for helping people with challenges like yours. He has a deep understanding of certain things that most people don't know. Maybe he can help you. Okon was skeptical. He had already tried so much, and the thought of seeking help from yet another person felt exhausting. But something in Kem's voice gave him hope. She wasn't mocking him or judging him like others had. She truly wanted to help. If you're willing, Nkem continued, I can take you to him. He may have answers you've been searching for. For the first time in a long while, Okon felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wise man could offer him the solution he had been seeking all these years. After all, what did he have to lose? The next morning, Okon met Nkem by the stream as agreed. Despite his initial reluctance, something deep inside him was hopeful. Perhaps this visit to the wise man could bring him the peace and resolution he had long sought. The walk to Nkem's village was long, but she chatted along the way. Her presence reassured him, and by the time they reached her village, Okon felt peace. Nkem led Okon through a small hut at the edge of the village. The air inside was thick with the scent of herbs, and an old man sat on a mat with his eyes half closed in meditation. This is Baba Kelechi, Nkem said softly, introducing the wise man. He has helped many people in our village with problems that seemed impossible to solve. I've already explained your situation to him. Baba Kelechi slowly opened his eyes and looked at Okon with a kind yet piercing gaze. You are troubled, young hunter, the old man said in a deep, calm voice. But your troubles do not stem from any curse. You have simply not been taught the ways of a woman's heart. Okon sat down, curious. I don't understand, Baba. What do you mean? Baba Kelechi leaned forward. His voice was gentle but firm. In your village, men are taught to be strong, to provide, and to be warriors. But they are not taught how to be tender, how to touch a woman's heart before touching her body. Intimacy is not just a physical act, my son. It is an emotional and spiritual connection. Okon listened carefully. No one had ever spoken to him like this before. Growing up, he had always believed that intimacy was about strength, about providing for the family, about proving oneself as a man. But now, this wise man was telling him something different. The problem, Baba Kelechi continued, is not your body, but with your approach. You have not learned to connect with your wives on a deeper level before seeking intimacy. A woman's body responds to love, patience, and understanding. You must touch her heart first. Make her feel safe and cherished. Okon absorbed the words of advice. All these years, he had gone straight to the physical aspect of his marriages, never considering the emotional or spiritual side. It had never occurred to him that there could be more to intimacy than just the act itself. Do not worry, Baba Kelechi reassured him. This is something you can learn. When you marry again, take your time, speak to your wife, make her feel loved, and let her trust you. When her heart is open, the rest will naturally follow. Okon now had a better understanding. His failed marriages had not been because of some curse or defect, but because he had not known how to connect with his wives on a deeper level. He had been so focused on the physical that he had overlooked the emotional and the psychological. Thank you, Baba, Okon said, his voice filled with gratitude. I never thought of it that way. I will take your advice to heart. As Okon left the hut, Nkem smiled at him warmly. I told you Baba Kelechi would help. Now, you just need to give yourself and your future wife time. Okon went back wiser to Ido village. He knew what to do next time. A few weeks later, word spread through the village that Okon had met someone new. Her name was Ngozi, a beautiful woman with a kind heart and gentle spirit. The villagers, of course, gossiped as they always did, speculating that this marriage would end just like the others. But Okon paid no attention. This time, he knew something they didn't. The wedding was a private, joyful occasion. On their wedding night, Okon remembered everything Baba Kelechi had told him. He didn't rush. Instead, he spoke to Ngozi softly, telling her how much he cherished her and how grateful he was for her kindness. They spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing their dreams, and for the first time, Okon felt deep emotional connection with his wife. Okon slowly began to understand the true meaning of intimacy. It wasn't just about the physical act, it was about love, trust, and connection. He touched Ngozi with gentleness, and when they finally came together, it was natural, effortless, and beautiful. For the first time in his life, Okon felt whole, both as a man and as a husband. Months went by and Ngozi became pregnant. The village was now filled with admiration for Okon, celebrating the news of the pregnancy with joy. Okon, once the subject of ridicule, was now a symbol of perseverance and hope. 1 year after their marriage, Ngozi gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and Okon finally had the family he had always dreamed of. As Okon carried his newborn daughter in his arms, he couldn't help but think of all the trials he had gone through to reach this moment. His journey had been long and painful, but in the end, he had found the key to happiness. Not through strength or pride, but through love, peace, patience, and understanding. He had finally become the man he had always wanted to be. Let's get into part 2 of the story. The sun was slowly setting over the quiet village as Okon returned from his hunting trip. He had been out in the forest all day, chasing down prey to provide for his household. Life had been peaceful since his marriage to Ngozi. She was everything he had hoped for, patient and understanding. Things were finally falling in place for Okon. As he approached his compound, he noticed someone standing by the entrance. At first, he thought it was Ngozi waiting for him, but as he came closer, he noticed it was Asari, his first wife, the woman who had left him because she was unable to deal with the size of his manhood. Asari, he called out in surprise. Yes, Okon, it's me, she replied in a firm voice. Have come back for what belongs to me. You are my husband, and I won't let another woman take you away from me. Okon was taken aback. He hadn't seen Asari in years, not since she packed her things and left their marriage. She had left because of his size, and now, here she was, standing before him with an unreasonable demand. Asari, you left, Okon said, trying to keep his voice steady. You left because I couldn't. We couldn't. Yes, I left because we couldn't consummate the marriage, she interrupted. But that doesn't mean I stopped loving you. I made a mistake, Okon. I shouldn't have walked away. But I'm here now. I've heard that things are different with your new wife. Okon looked at her. Asari, what you heard is true. Ngozi and I have learned how to make things work. But that doesn't mean I can just welcome you back like nothing happened. You left me when I needed you most. Asari took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Okon. I acted out of frustration. But I'm ready to be patient now. I can't stand by and watch another woman take what's mine. Before Okon could respond, Ngozi appeared from inside the house with her calm demeanor. She had heard the conversation from the doorway and stepped forward to greet her husband and Asari. Welcome back, Asari, Ngozi said with a gentle voice. This house is big enough for all of us, but it's up to Okon to decide what happens next. Okon glanced between the two women with a heavy heart. In the past, it was common for men to have multiple wives, but he hadn't expected this. With a sigh, he knew he had no choice but to consult the elders. The next morning, after speaking with the elders, their decision was clear. Asari could stay, as long as she respected the household and did not disrupt the peace. Despite his initial reluctance, Okon accepted their advice. As the sun set again that evening, Okon prepared himself for the night. He decided to approach Asari the way he had been with Ngozi, gently touching her and speaking softly to her, hoping to ease her discomfort. But Asari wasn't having it. Stop touching me like that, Okon, she said, pulling away. It's an abomination for a man to touch a woman in such places before intimacy. This is not how it's supposed to be. Asari, please, just listen to me, Okon said. His voice was soft and pleading. This is how I was able to make it work with Ngozi. The old wise man had told me. I don't care what the old man said, Asari snapped. I'm not just like her. I don't want you touching me like that. Okon sighed. He had hoped that this would go smoothly, but it was clear that Asari wasn't ready to accept his new approach. That night, they slept apart, with Okon feeling confused, but this was just the beginning. The following days had unfolded a tense atmosphere in Okon's household. Asari's return had disrupted the harmony that he and Ngozi had cultivated. The tension was palpable, and Okon felt the pressure of both women's expectations. He had always believed that love could conquer all, but now he found himself questioning whether that was true. Asari busied herself around the house, trying to reclaim her role as the first wife. She cooked meals, cleaned the compound, and attended to their needs. Yet each attempt felt like an uphill battle. Whenever she tried to approach Okon, he would distance himself, reminding her of the past and the pain she caused him. One evening, as Okon sat outside, Ngozi joined him with an unhappy look. Okon, we need to talk. Things can't go on like this, she said softly. He nodded, staring into the distance. I know, I don't want to hurt anyone, but Asari is difficult. Ngozi took a deep breath. She's hurting, Okon. You know that. She loved you, and seeing you with me must feel like salt on an open wound. I can't go back to the way things were. It didn't work then, and it can't work now, Okon replied. Then we need to find a way to make things work together, Ngozi urged with a firm tone. You can't ignore her feelings forever. Maybe if you talk to her. Talk? I've tried that. Every time I approach her, she rejects me. She doesn't want to listen. She only wants to feel like she's the only one, Okon said. Perhaps you need to show her that you can love both of us in different ways, Ngozi suggested, her eyes searching his. You've learned to be intimate with me. Maybe you can teach her how to accept this new way. Okon sighed. I just don't want to lose you, Ngozi. I finally found peace with you. Then fight for it, she said. Show Asari that things can be different this time. Love doesn't have to be a competition. With that conversation, Okon resolved to approach Asari differently. The next evening, he summed up courage to invite her outside for a talk. He found her sitting on the porch, staring into empty space with a frowning face. Asari, he called gently, taking a seat beside her. I want to talk. She turned to him. What is there to talk about? You've already made your choice, Okon. I haven't made a choice, he replied. I want both of you to be happy, and I need you to understand my feelings too. Asari crossed her arms. You think I don't understand? I've been here, watching you with her. I know I was the first, but it seems I mean nothing to you now. That's not true, he pleaded. You mean everything to me. But we both know how our past was filled with pain. I want to do better this time, for both of you. I want to find a way to share my love. She turned away and said with a whispering voice, You can't just decide to share love like it's a commodity, Okon. It's not that simple. Then help me make it simple, he urged with desperation. Teach me what you need from me. I want to understand. Asari's shoulders relaxed slightly, the anger melting away just a bit. You want me to teach you? She asked. Yes, he said. I want to learn how to love you in a way that makes you feel cherished. You deserve that. Asari paused, considering his words. It won't be easy, you know. I have my doubt, and I won't pretend otherwise. I don't expect you to, Okon replied, earnestly. But let's work things together. I want us to find a way back to each other. With a hesitant nod, Asari began to speak. Then I need you to promise me that you'll be patient. I need time to learn how to trust you again. I promise, Okon said. Together, we can figure this out. As the night grew darker, the two of them sat together under the stars, beginning the delicate dance of rebuilding their relationship. The atmosphere shifted slowly into a softer one. One morning, as Okon prepared for another day of hunting, he noticed Asari in the kitchen, stirring a pot of yam porridge. The aroma filled the air, reminding him of their early days together. It struck him then how much he had missed their shared moment. Asari, he called out. His voice was filled with warmth. This smells delicious. Are you making my favorite? She turned to him. I thought it might remind you of home. You used to love it when I made it for you. Indeed I did, Okon said, stepping closer. It's one of the things I've missed most since you left. After breakfast, Okon went hunting, and Asari stayed behind to clean and prepare the house. Before we continue our story, hit the subscribe button right now, please, and turn on post notifications so that whenever we make a post, you'll be the first to get notified. Please subscribe before we continue our story. Have you subscribed? Let's continue. In her quiet moment, she found herself reminiscing about their wedding day, a day that was filled with joy and hope, only to be followed by disappointment. Later that afternoon, when Okon returned, he found Asari outside, hanging washed clothes on the line. He was grateful watching her do that. Asari, he called, walking towards her. How about we take a break from chores and go for a walk, just like we used to? She agreed, and they took a walk around the village. Do you remember the first time we went to the market together? Asari chuckled softly. Yes, you were so eager to impress me. You bought that enormous bunch of plantains, but you didn't know how to carry them. You ended up dropping half of them. I was determined to show you I could provide. Okon laughed, shaking his head at the memory, and I made quite a fool of myself. I remember feeling so embarrassed for you, but deep down, I admired your willingness to try, Asari said. Just like now, Okon said, his tone was sincere. I'm trying to show you how I can be the husband you deserve. They found a quiet spot by the riverbank and sat together. Asari, he said, I want to ask you something. Go on, she replied, her gaze fixed on the water. If you are willing to work on our relationship, I want us to learn together. We can explore intimacy in new ways. I believe that love can heal us, but we have to be open to it. I mean that we can take our time to understand each other's needs, he clarified. Let's learn about touch and intimacy in a way that feels right for both of us. She smiled. I like that, Okon, but it won't be easy. Then we'll face it together, Okon promised. I won't let you feel alone in this." In the days that followed, Okon bought gifts for Asari in an attempt to rekindle their love and give her a sense of belonging. One evening, as Okon and his wives sat at the veranda enjoying a meal of bushmeat pepper soup prepared from the game Okon had caught, someone came into the house through the backyard door with a big bag. They wondered who it was, for it was late in the evening. "Who is that?" Okon asked. "It's me, Amina." Okon quickly recognized her voice. It was Amina, his third wife, the one who had told everyone in the village about her frustration with Okon's size because he couldn't consummate their marriage and had left him just before he married Ngozi. She was returning because her attempt to remarry someone else had failed twice. When she heard that Okon had remarried and even had a child with his new wife, she decided to come back. After all, he had married her and the bride price was not returned after their marriage failed. She was ashamed to come back to Okon during the day, so she decided to come back late in the evening, following a bush track to avoid the eyes and gossips of the villagers. Okon stood up. "What are you doing here, Amina?" he asked in a cold voice. "I've come back to my husband," she said. "Which husband? The one you disgraced in the entire village because of the problem we had?" Okon said angrily. Amina broke down in tears, begging Okon to forgive all she did. "I was frustrated and afraid that we may never be able to consummate our marriage and have children. Please, I'm sorry," she said. The two wives were watching in shock, unsure of what Okon's decision will be. Okon was still angry, but couldn't send Amina away because it was late, so he allowed her to spend the night, but he warned her that she would leave his house first thing in the morning of the next day. The next morning, Okon woke up early to send Amina away and prepare for his hunting trip. But something shocking happened when he opened her door. He couldn't find her, but her belongings were still there. Okon was surprised. "What kind of problem is this?" he whispered to himself. Where could she have gone so early? Okon didn't know whether or not to go out hunting that day. He wasn't sure what would happen when he's not around, or what to expect when he comes back. He decided to delay a little bit to see if Amina would come back. He thought she must have pulled a trick on him, knowing he goes out hunting every day. Maybe she went out hiding somewhere so she could come back home when she discovers I'm out, he thought. About an hour later, two messengers from the king came to Okon's compound. "The king needs you to come to the palace now," they announced. "What could be wrong?" Okon asked. "It's the king's instruction. Please come with us." Okon left everything and followed them. When they got to the king's palace, he saw Amina there. It became clear to Okon that Amina had reported to the king. The truth was that Amina had come early to beg the king, narrating all that had happened between her and Okon. She pleaded the king and told him that she wants to get back with her husband, promising to be of good behavior. The king had summoned Okon to hear his own side of the story. After the king had heard from both of them, there was no difference in the two versions of the story. He counseled Okon to go back with his wife, pointing out that the bride price wasn't returned, which made her still his wife. He also mentioned that she had promised to be of good behavior. Okon had nothing more to say. He couldn't disobey the king, so he went home with his wife and continued the day's activity. The next few weeks transformed the dynamics within Okon's household. The three women began to share household responsibilities, each woman taking turns in the kitchen and working together to maintain the home. Okon marveled at how quickly things had changed. He had to work hard to care for three women and a child. When Amina left Okon the first time, she had gone back to learn ways to be with a man, especially the kind of man that had Okon's size. She had inquired of the older women, who told her how to prepare herself for it. Some native remedies and enhancers were prescribed for her, and she came back ready for Okon. Only that this time, Okon had remarried Ngozi, and his first wife was back to him. With Okon and Amina, it was easy because of everything Amina had learned and practiced. Okon also applied the old man's advice, and everything worked like magic. The household continued to enjoy peace. The three wives lived in harmony, each subtly competing for her husband's attention. For Asari, it was her meals. she put so much effort to make sure that Okon fits well and would usually prepare his favorite. Okon loved Asari's meals so much, and it made him really love her. For Ngozi, it was her daughter. She prided herself as the first wife to give Okon a child, and she tried her best to make sure that she conceives a male child before the other wives. Okon loved his daughter so much and treated the mother, Ngozi, with love too. For Amina, it was her bedmatics. She had invested her time and energy to learn what would work for a man like Okon, and it was as though she had custom-made moves for Okon in that area. Okon loved her so much for this. He tried to treat his wives as equally as he could, but each wife kept outdoing the other in different ways. There was subtle rivalry among the wives. One afternoon, Ekanem arrived at Okon's house. He had gone out to hunt, but she met his 3 wives at home. Ekanem was the second wife Okon had married after Asari, who had left her marriage unannounced because of the problem of Okon's manhood. Now, she was back. None of the wives knew her because they had not met her before then, so she waited for Okon to be back. Okon had thought one time to himself that maybe one day Ekanem would come back because he witnessed as his wives returned to him one by one. First, it was Asari, the first wife he had married, then Amina, the third wife. So he had prepared his mind, just in case Ekanem decides to come back. Now, she was back, and Okon was not at home. When he came back home that evening and met her, he was surprised, but it confirmed his thoughts and suspicion. He couldn't help but take her back because he had already prepared his mind to accept her if she comes back, and also he had already accepted his other 2 wives when they returned. Okon's household was full, each wife meeting his unique need with subtle rivalry because each one wanted to be the apple of his eyes. The village was abuzz with the news. Before their very eyes, each of Okon's wives returned. Some men envied him. Others said he would die soon from the troubles of marrying many women. But Okon didn't mind. He continued to provide for his household. He remembered that the villagers had mocked him in the past when each of his wives left, and now that he had them back, the same villagers were still talking. The elders admired and commended Okon for his maturity in handling and taking care of 4 wives. It was rare to see a man with 4 wives in the village. In fact, no one had 4 wives in the whole village. The highest was 2. And here was Okon, handling a large household with 4 wives and providing for them. There was peace and harmony in his home. His wives had become pregnant almost at the same time, and each one prayed to be the one to give Okon his first male child, just to gain more of his affection and attention as the mother of his first son. And that was how Okon's oversized manhood, which had initially chased away 3 wives, helped him to keep and maintain 4 wives, all happy. Alright, so what did you learn from this story? Share it in the comment section. And please subscribe to this channel right now and turn on post notification so that whenever a story is posted, you'll be the first to get notified and you'll be the first to watch. Like and share this. Don't forget to drop your lessons in the comment section. Subscribe and see you in our next story. Bye-bye.